most terrifying sound I've ever heard isn't what you'd expect. It's not footsteps in the dark or whispering voices from the shadows. It's my doorbell ringing at 3 a.m. It's not just a sound, it's an intrusion, a jarring slice of noise that cuts through the stillness like a knife. That moment of silence after the ring, when the air seems to freeze and time slows down, is where terror sits waiting. What should be my sanctuary, my home, becomes a haunted space, filled with echoes of something I can't quite place. I was always the strange kid growing up, unsettlingly quiet, too isolated, and strangely drawn to the oddities of life. My mother's instability didn't help. I never knew my father, and the stories I heard about him didn't make sense. According to her, he was a scientist, working on some top-secret project involving time travel. As absurd as it sounded, I clung to it. She'd tell me how he manipulated the very fabric of time, only to become lost, trapped somewhere between now and then. I wanted to believe her, but over time, I realized her mind had shattered. Her madness became my reality, and I became a casualty of her delusions. I had no friends, no safe space outside my home. Her absence was sometimes a blessing, but the darkness that filled the house never left. I became haunted not by things I could see, but by what I couldn't, a voice, a low, constant whisper that filled my dreams. For a year, I woke each night to that voice, a male, distorted whisper that seemed to come from nowhere. You need to get out of here. I'm a lost soul, trapped in time. It was the same message, every night, like a loop. No matter how many times I told myself it was just a dream, the voice felt real. It felt like it knew me, like it was calling me. As time passed, my mental state unraveled. The dreams persisted, and with each night, the line between dream and reality blurred further. The voice seemed to be getting closer, urging me to escape, but I never could. It was as though the voice was trapped with me, tied to the walls of my home. The more I ignored it, the worse it became. The voice became a constant hum in my mind, an unanswered question that left me drowning in confusion. Finally, after years of barely holding on, I moved out. I found a small apartment, far away from the madness, and for the first time in years, I thought I could breathe. The silence was almost too much at first. It was too calm, too peaceful. I didn't know how to live without the constant noise of my mother's irrationality. I thought that moving away would fix everything, but something followed me. It started innocently enough. One night, around 3 a.m., my doorbell rang. I jolted awake, heart pounding, like a sudden storm had ripped through the calm. It was familiar. The doorbell's tune had echoed in my childhood home countless times. But this time, it didn't feel like a call for a visitor. It felt like an omen, an intrusion into my fragile peace. I lay there, frozen, as it rang again. The melody was 3 notes. 3 notes that made my stomach twist. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and approached the door, my pulse thundering in my ears. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing. But when I opened the door, the silence was suffocating. No one was there. The next night, the same thing happened. And the night after that, I thought I was imagining things, but by the 3rd night, when I looked through the peephole, I saw him. A figure dark and indistinct, barely more than a shadow. His face was blurred, like a smear on glass, but his eyes were wide, filled with something deep and ancient. "You must leave this place," he whispered, his voice faint, but cutting through the silence like a blade. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. His lips didn't move, but I heard the words clearly. "I'm just a lost soul, trapped in time." I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest, but before I could react, the figure vanished. The silence was absolute. Then, his voice echoed from behind me. "I am lost, and you are too." I spun around. There he stood, his form still blurry, an apparition I could hardly comprehend. "What do you want?" I asked, voice trembling. "I don't know who I am, but I know why I'm here," he replied, his words resonating in my mind like a distant thunderstorm. "There is a link between us, between what was, what is, and what could be." My mind raced. The connection, the voice, could it be? Could this be my father, trapped in time, as my mother once told me? "Yes," he confirmed, as though reading my thoughts. "But you cannot stay here. This place is not what it seems." I felt an invisible weight pressing on my chest, and suddenly my knees buckled. I gasped for air, struggling to breathe as if something was suffocating me. My vision swam. When I finally spoke again, I could barely manage the words. "When?" Before he faded from view, he whispered, "When the doorbell rings again, listen for the 3 notes. Then you'll know." The words rattled in my mind like a terrible prophecy. The doorbell, those 3 notes, had now become my doom. Was this real? Was I losing my mind? That night, the fear gripped me like never before. My thoughts spiraled. Was I going crazy? Or was my father really out there, trapped between the past and the future, calling for me? I didn't know. I couldn't be sure. But I could feel his presence, like a cold breath on the back of my neck. I sought help, thinking that therapy would make sense of this. The doctors didn't offer answers. They only gave me labels: schizophrenia, paranoia. They suggested I check into a facility, so I did, desperate to find some relief. But the place was worse than I imagined. The walls whispered at night. The halls stretched endlessly, and the air was thick with something unnameable. And still, the doorbell rang. Some nights I hear it, the melody, those 3 notes, echoing through the dark like a cold hand gripping my heart. My father's voice calls out to me in my dreams, a soft, eerie whisper that says, "I'm waiting." But waiting for what? For me to join him, to unravel the mystery of what happened to him. Here, in this place of lost souls, I've learned that I'm not mad. The truth is here, buried in the silence, between the walls of this cold, sterile place. And the doorbell, those 3 notes, are my key. I know now that I am not just a victim of time. I am part of it. The past, present, and future are tangled, and my father's voice is the thread that ties us together. When the doorbell rings again, when the 3 notes call out, I will answer. Because whatever it is, whatever is waiting for me, we will finally be reunited.